Welcome to the Herd Marketing Podcast with Mark Baker and me, Phil Waring. And today we're just going to run you through some extra marketing bits from the past week, things we've come across, things we've enjoyed, and just general business goodness. So, I mean, just before we came into the studio, we were actually having a conversation outside about WhatsApp, weren't we?
Yeah,
it's quite interesting, kind of like how they're going to monetize and things. You had some thoughts on it?
Yeah, changing times for WhatsApp, certainly. Watched a sort of YouTube video with Steve Bartlett from Social Chain up in Manchester, and he was talking about WhatsApp and how it's going to monetize moving forward. And he mentioned an interesting article about how they want businesses to move away from sort of email maybe onto their platform, and as such it's going to be a sort of free service if businesses reply within a certain time frame of say 24 hours, and thereafter they were talking loosely that they might be charging businesses to pay if they reply after that 24 hours, which sort of infers a bit of a customer services based approach, really, encouraging
like a
businesses.
Speedier loop for the customer services role, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's interesting, really, because it's I'm wondering how they're going to integrate it and how they're going to pull it all together, because at the moment the sort of Facebook and Instagram Messenger and ads and everything that's sort of managed through Facebook Ads Manager, it's going to be interesting if they start sort of putting ads into your WhatsApp feed. I'm
try not to be too intrusive with it.
Yeah, because it's heavily encrypted WhatsApp. That's one of the sort of selling points, isn't it? That it's end-to-end encryption.
So does that make it harder for people to target then? Is that what the encryption side of it could mean? Is it's harder to target your adverts to specific people? I suppose you don't really build out a profile, do you?
No, I'm not entirely sure on that side of it. It's more that the messages are secure, so you it's not being able to be read by other people. But I don't know how putting ads in, how that's going to change it, or if they will, or whether it will be more just messages based. But long term, the Facebook paid an awful lot of money for WhatsApp, so at some point they've got
to start making some money from it.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll integrate it with like Facebook Messenger and stuff, because I do just, when you talk about like the encryption side of things, it's like when you have like social media adverts, it's based off what you digest as a user. And I just think like with WhatsApp, there's no way of finding what people are digesting unless they pull in third-party apps. Like Facebook didn't got into trouble with. So it's like unless they actually look at your Facebook profile and see what you're looking at on Facebook, and it then transfers over onto WhatsApp.
Unless they use the mobile number that you use within Facebook. So when you put your number into Facebook, for example, but not every user puts the number into Facebook. That might be the only way of segmenting it, really. But
that might be why it's taken them so long, really, because that's such a kind of a pull factor for people to use WhatsApp, is the fact that it's all encrypted and it's very kept private. Which is like so different to what Facebook was for a while. You know, that was very much just like everything was open to the extent that third-party apps could just see what you were doing and basing all their sort of adverts off that. That's interesting, because I know I sort of mentioned when we were talking about it in terms of, well, you originally mentioned about WhatsApp having stories. I didn't even really know that was a thing. That's really cool though, and you saying it was bigger in America. And my initial thought then went to, will they make it into kind of like an Instagram sponsored advert, you know, within that sort of storyline? Because for me, I think that's quite a good way of not being too intrusive. I think I don't find it too intrusive when I'm looking through my Instagram stories feed and seeing adverts come up. And I sort of have this like mantra stuck in my head, and it's always fast media. And I think as we've progressed through this whole how people digest media, it's become faster. It's almost become like a quicker hit dopamine rush of you know, your social media goodness, if you like. And I think Instagram stories was on that side of things, and I would argue that most people look through their Instagram stories now before maybe even scrolling down. So that might be really interesting to see if WhatsApp can do something with that, really.
I think maybe just as a quick thought, maybe WhatsApp, when you do video calls, I don't know if you use video calls on WhatsApp. I know I use it quite a bit, but they may put sort of video ads in, or ads like YouTube do.
Yeah.
So you can close them. But actually, I'm thinking I'm not sure how that would work, because on YouTube, for example, when you click on those ads, you hyperlink away from the page, and you can't really do that mid-call. So
Yeah.
but I don't know, though. There might be a wraparound, or there might be something in it. It's going to be interesting, but I certainly think it's going to come in the next 12 months. You're going to see changes to WhatsApp, and it's interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. Because I know, like, what you were saying about sort of like YouTube videos, and I was on my phone, and I just can't get over how, like, they're increasing the amount of, like, adverts in videos, I swear. So, like, when I clicked into a video, I had 2 adverts I had to sit through now and, like, watch, as opposed to maybe just 1, and that was it. And now they've integrated, not all that recently, but they've started integrating, like, more and more ads in each video. So, yeah, I suppose WhatsApp could do something similar to that, because they're quite generic ads. They're not too targeted, I don't think. It's just, as a business, if I was to use Facebook to advertise, at the moment you kind of go through Facebook to do Instagram, because it's all very targeted.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how that would fit in with WhatsApp, and so I suppose that's just going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, I suppose, so come back to YouTube then, and we were talking about the amount of adverts in videos, and I sort of told you, didn't I, about that article that I was reading about YouTubers, and I saw this article. It's mad. It was like a 4-year-old girl who was, I think she was coined to be like the biggest YouTuber in the UK at the moment, and she earns more than the Prime Minister. And it's just crazy, though, like, how much money someone can earn now from any source of, like, media. And I think it works out to roughly $16,000 a year, if you getting on average about 2 million views a month, which 2 million views sounds a lot. It sounds crazy to, a company, maybe a small company, being able to tap into a YouTuber who gets that coverage of 2 million views. But 2 million views is just a drop in the ocean for a lot of YouTubers.
Yeah.
And we were talking again just before coming in here about influencer marketing, and I think it goes quite tied into that, because when you look as a business on these big numbers, 2 million views a month, wow, that's amazing. But it's that, is it genuine traffic? Have you ever sort of experienced using influencers, or is it something that you'd like to use? Because I know at one point when you were in Arrive, you were looking at kind of like younger pro cyclists and kind of tapping into that sort of vision, because I think if you can work with like a genuine influencer that's interested and passionate about something, it's quite engaging for a user. Is it something that you'd be interested in adventuring into?
I think influencer marketing is important. I don't know if it's had its day yet, but the one thing I would say is that I think consumers are becoming more and more savvy to the sort of stories and how authentic and how true they are or they're not. And I think now you've got influencers who are calling themselves influencers that are trying to influence a product that they've never used, and it's quite crystal clear that, and it's that's not good marketing.
Fake advertising.
Yeah, it all ties in with the fake news and that whole Donald Trump sort of thing that he coined.
Yeah, and what Dave was saying before about that woman or girl who had like 2 million followers. What was it? 36 hoodies, tops?
Yeah,
36 something.
36 tops, yeah.
36 tops. That's crazy that she only sold 36 tops.
And she couldn't even get to 36.
Oh, she couldn't? Was that her? Oh my god.
No, it's sad. That's
2 million followers just to do that.
Yeah.
Imagine paying for that. Imagine a company paying for that, because it works differently, doesn't it? Sometimes you can pay by the traffic they get. Sometimes it is like a affiliate marketing kind of code. That's when they always say like 10% off this, or type in this code. But sometimes they're just straight out like sponsored ads. Someone's just dumped in a load of money to add that.
I think it works for specific sort of industries and sectors. I think if you say, for example, you have a model, like a male or a female model advertising a certain item of clothing, and they use a very specific code, and they advertise that, and then you can track that back. That's quite handy, because you can see straight away then sort of the views versus any potential conversions that have used that code, and that's quite good. But I think in the instance we were talking about then with Dave, I think they've obviously got the audience completely wrong versus
Yeah.
the product they're trying to sell, and that's probably a great example of bad marketing. Really,
Yeah.
it's
And I suppose it has a knock-on effect in terms of like a risk factor involved. If you get the wrong influencer and you put your product in the wrong influencer's hand, you know, you can see, going back to that girl before, she's like 4 years old and she's like one of the biggest YouTubers in the UK. Now, if someone put a product in the hands of her, you're automatically assuming you're going after a younger audience.
Yeah.
So then trying to sell that same product, this is a very grand statement, but trying to sell that product to someone that's maybe 30 plus, it's such a big risk to take just based off numbers. And I think the problem is sometimes with marketing is it can be too data driven. And I think there is still that human element to it where you need to be quite savvy with the relationship side with your customer.
I think the relationship marketing and building on the lifetime value of the customer and developing that emotional response, that's key in marketing. I think everything else thereafter just builds to that, really. I think if you can get an emotional response off someone, and I think that's why a young child of 4, I haven't seen these videos, so there's some assumption I'm making, but you can sort of infer that there's a level of cuteness about it, and a lot of ahs and a lot of ums from mums and dads, and they can relate to it, and that is the sort of target that you're looking at when you're doing marketing. You want that response. You want to elicit that response, because as soon as you get that response from a potential customer, so-called budgets, so-called moments of self-control kind of go out the window, and it's an impulse purchase often. And that's when the sales start to come in, and that's the sort of nirvana that you're looking for with good influencer marketing. You're looking for that,
to tap into that like user behavior, that customer behavior, isn't it?
Yeah, and an emotional response is the strongest response, and if you can relate to it, on whether that be, like we just said, a child doing a certain video for YouTube, or whether it be a jersey for a cyclist or an athlete wearing a certain type of headwear, or whatever it might be, it's that response is key, really. And I think once you get that, and I think when you look at that as well, if you looking for examples of that, Nike do that exceptionally well. Their videos and their slogan, "Just do it," and their videos is so, it elicits that response, doesn't it? When you're in the gym, just do it, or when you're on the roads, just do it. And
it's a real like and I think Nike do it really well as well, because they do a lot of like vintage things. You know, they really do like throwback things and throwback jerseys and throwback trainers. I think they've nailed it with the whole customer emotional side, sort of eliciting that response from customers when they drop new products. And I think other places that do it really well are people that piggyback off that. So I was looking, there's some really expensive trainers that were Nike, but they were redone. So you get people that, have you seen them? They're like customized trainers. Yeah,
they like Air Jordans or something, and they bring them back, don't they, from the 90s, and they go crazy for them, sort of remakes and that.
I just think there's a place in the Baltic in Liverpool here. They do amazing business, but their primary income is just doing up trainers. I see, it's crazy.
Oh, you mean like respraying and painting and redeveloping
customizing them? I think it's crazy that people get attached. But yeah,
no, it's good that there's a guy I know I follow on Instagram called Artful Kicks, and he sprays sort of shoes. He does the old Adidas Originals, and he does them, and he moved into doing sort of cycling shoes, and just because nobody else was doing it, the shoes were always sort of black and white, quite plain, and he did sort of bespoke hand painted shoes, and he did such a great job on them, and they were really artistic. They were very special, and now you've got like the top tier professionals wearing them now, who oh wow, you've got big brands like City or Gern, and they are now being sort of updated by this guy that I don't know if he still does, but he was working from home, and he was a real artist in his work. But
so do you think, so going back to that, so did he do up these cycling, I'm just really interested, so did he do up these cycling shoes, trainers, boots, trainers,
shoes. Yeah.
Did he do up these cycling shoes and then sell them to just customers? And
So what I inquired, obviously being a cyclist, I inquired, and often when you're a sportsman, you have obviously a heritage of where you're from, and you've obviously got a story to get to the point of being at the top of your game. So what he did at the time, I'm not sure if this still works now because this is sort of 12 months ago, but what you'd do is you'd buy the footwear and send it to him and then tell him what you wanted doing. Wow. And then he'd obviously just charge you based on his work. He wouldn't buy the shoes and then do them for you. You had to provide the shoes, so to speak. But for example, like if you're British national champ or you're Italian national champion, wherever you're from, or you're Welsh or you're Scottish, you'd have things like your flag painted on the inside of your heel, or it was just the small touches that were quite unique. Or if you led a particular race, you'd won particular races, or if you were world champion, you'd have certain designs, logos, or patterns on your shoes. And it's called the guy that did it was called Artful Kicks. If you check him out on Instagram, he's pretty talented. It's worth a look.
I think there's been this sort of real crossover now to like personalization goods. I think because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the world's got bigger and so people feel smaller. I don't know what the psychology is behind it, but I definitely see with like a trend within big companies, going back to your Nike, you know, they started doing like personalized boots like years ago, and now everything's just personalized. And I think that's just definitely almost like a way forward, like a tailoring approach to like everything.
I think you're right. A lot of companies do it. I know Oakley Eyewear, you can customize your eyewear now on Oakley, so you can have sort of different colour lens with frames. I know Ray-Ban do it. I know if you're into cycling again, Rafa have moved into doing customization of kit, and that's they're actually a great company to reference in terms of marketing, how well
their videos are amazing. Or they always used to be. I haven't seen them for a while, but I remember, I'm not a cyclist, but watching those Rafa videos, it makes you want to be a cyclist.
Yeah, they changed the dynamic a bit of their approach, and it's actually a really interesting case study. If you look at it, Rafa were launched in 2004, I think, in London by Simon Mottram, and they quickly became like the biggest cycling apparel company in the UK, I think, and they were real industry disruptors. They come in and disrupted the industry. It was dead expensive stuff. It was nice, and it grew really quickly, and it focused on the sort of scene from the 60s and 70s of sort of being in Europe and struggling and getting to grips with your bike over the old coals with them, and it created that emotional response which we were talking about earlier. And then they partnered with Sky, and it went crazy for them then when Chris Froome won the Tour. But the actual ethos and the branding all stayed the same, and the glory years and the struggle and then falling in love with the sport. And I think they did that really well. But when they got acquired by Walmart a couple of years ago, they got acquired by an American company, Walmart, and they changed they changed the shift away, I think, more to an American focus. And then recently they moved into sponsoring the biggest American team, so they do the apparel for them now, which is obviously their target market is the home market now. And it's interesting to see how not that the kits changed, but the videos and how they talk.
They became a bit more like commercialised, I felt, and this is coming from someone that doesn't know anything about cycling. And I don't know how they disrupted markets. I don't know the ins and outs. You're probably the man to go to for that because you like cycling. But it's something about when I watch those videos that they put up on YouTube like from years ago, it just made me want to get into cycling. And I've never really wanted to before, but they were so good. But then more recently they've got a bit more commercialized. There's still like an entertainment factor with them, but you can, even from an outside point looking in, you can see that they've definitely tried to change it up, change market, and that explains why I really go into like an American market. It's probably just a slightly different audience for them. Yeah,
they've kept the sort of core British sort of identity, and they've recently partnered with Paul Smith and brought out some PS jerseys by Rafa, which are, if you like that brand, which I do, the jerseys are really cool.
Paul Smith, are they striped?
Yes. How did you guess? Yeah, they're like a traditional British racing green with his colourful stripes on, and technically they're not what you'd have on a cycling jersey, but they are quite they are quite sort of cool in terms of relating back to Paul Smith and Rafa, which again, for those that don't know, they have a history, so to speak. But I think, again, sort of we'll always try and bring it back to marketing here. I think they both have a similar sort of core demographic of customers, in that they target people who are 35 plus, who have got a disposable income, who can afford £100 plus items of clothing in their wardrobe. And I think that correlation, again, works well. You wouldn't have sort of Paul Smith partnering with sort of Primark, for example. It just doesn't work too well. But their sort of demographic sort of marry well together. And
so is Rafa, is that like an English British company?
It's owned by Walmart now, but
because the one thing I would say about Paul Smith, and it's probably similar with Rafa then, is like that underlining asset of like British heritage.
It's quintessentially British.
He did so well in, was it Japan? I remember seeing his documentary. Paul Smith just smashed it in Japan. I think it's because they really like that British cultural side of things, because it's something that they're just probably not used to. Like, I for some reason have a massive fascination with like Tokyo, and like, I've always wanted to go. I think it's amazing. I love that culture, and I think it's because it's like, to me, it's like the other side of the world. So I think there's quite a big push around the world for like British heritage.
It's funny you should touch on that, really. Rafa, like I did a lot of research into Rafa, and their core market outside of the UK, that is, or their biggest market was the US, but also that the fastest growing market was the Far East, was sort of Japan, South Korea. And it's quite interesting to see that sort of, again, linking up with Paul Smith, who has such a following in the Far East. These things don't happen by coincidence.
I was going to say, there's talks being had there,
and it's quite clear that that's been done for a commercial reason. And it's interesting.
I mean, for both Rafa and like Paul Smith, it's just it'll just be an amazing collaboration for those. Is it something that, so they've already done it?
Yeah,
I will buy one of those jerseys. Wow, see how
have
much
a
they
look.
cost. Have a look. But I just love Paul Smith, and I love that quote. I've always forgotten what it is off the top of my head, but I've always loved that quote. Is it, you can find inspiration in anything, and if you can't, you're not looking hard enough. How cool is that? I love that. But yeah, so sort of moving on then from Paul Smith and Rafa and the sort of fashion side, and kind of pulling it a few steps back to kind of like the influencer marketing type situation. I know last time we kind of touched upon sort of self-branding. Do you think, again, using Paul Smith as an example, do you think a large part of his market share has come from him and people following him and his designs? Because I know in the world of fashion designs, it's very much based around the designer. Was that the same for Rafa? Do you think that kind of goes across board now into other industries? I know you mentioned Steve Bartlett before, someone in the marketing space who's self-branded really well. You've got the Gary Vaynerchuks, you've got, you know, all kinds of people in different areas. We had Ash Murray, where I work, come in, and he's done really well with self-branding. Do you think that's that kind of fashion designer, these are my designs and this is what I think, is now across different industries?
I think ultimately, especially nowadays where you've got so many different types of media, I think you can be yourself and people buy into
your point of view.
They buy into people, and it's easy to see any falsities or anything, and it's quite, in terms of self-branding, I think it's, if you put the content out and people like it and they buy into you and they come back to you, like the Gary Vaynerchuk, Steve Bartlett, even like if you're getting quite specific about sort of marketing, like your Neil Patels and that, they do a lot of, but ultimately they add a lot of value. They give a lot, and they get, but obviously they gain a lot in terms of the subscriptions and the followers and everything else. But
it's kind of like a two-pronged approach. You know, if you can do really well and self, you know, promote on, just name a platform now that's monetized. You can do it on anything. You can earn money as an influencer on LinkedIn now. But as a business owner, if you're self-promoting, you're earning money from the platforms you're working on. If you build build a following. So if you're giving that value, like you're saying, if you're giving loads of value and not necessarily asking anything from the masses, you're still going to be earning money from giving almost like free advice.
Yeah.
Because of the views, because of the ad clicks, all that sort of, you know, side of things. But then the people that you kind of want B2B, and they pick up on you on different platforms. So I've not seen the insides of VaynerMedia from Gary Vaynerchuk or Neil Patel's agency, but I personally think 9 times out of 10, they probably wouldn't disagree, a large population of B2B clients that they have will probably have seen them or have heard of them through their social media. I think it's become such an amazing beast, social media, to do both, reaching out to users and potential customers, but also the big B2B clients and landing them.
I think there's a touch point, isn't there? I think sort of potential clients or customers, they touch with you sort of, I think, is it 7 times before you get any sort of traction with them. And I think part of self-branding and part of marketing, it's all interlinked, I think. And it's so long as you're adding value and you're creating quality content, and your users and customers are getting something from it that they can either learn or see the authenticity in your delivery, and then sort of become aware of you, if you like, at the awareness stage. I think that's important. And once you get that and you become an expert in your field and people recognise that, the sort of sky's the limit, really. And that's when the magic happens, so to speak.
The magic does happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up, really. So you've been listening to Heard Marketing, the podcast with Mark Baker and myself, Phil Waring. Thanks for listening.
Cheers, thanks.
Do you want to hashtag it?
Yeah, hashtag Heard Marketing. Gather your audience.
Gather your audience. Boom.